Hello? Anybody home? Should I take my shoes off or... I was told this is where we'd meet for the 8th season. Echo! Now batting for the Boston Red Sox. Jesus, this place is a mess. I thought this guy was a count. Doesn't he ever clean up after himself? Excuse me. I didn't see you stalking me like a creeper.
I am Dracula.
Sorry, where are my manners? My name is Jonathan Harker. I mean Jonathan Paula. I'm here to critique some vampire films.
I bid you welcome.
You may not be so welcoming after you hear my review.
Listen to them. Children of the night. What music they make.
Speaking of music, what are your thoughts on the intro theme? Okay then. This is Movie Night! Hello and welcome to a brand new season of Movie Night, back and better than ever. I'm your host, Jonathan Paula. I've got a new haircut, a new suit, and finally a teleprompter, so prepare yourself for lots of unbroken eye contact. Tonight we'll kick off the 8th season by taking our 4th look at horror films, by focusing on vampire movies. More specifically, ones about the famous blood-sucking count known as Dracula, first introduced by Bram Stoker in his 19th century novel of the same name. Although the Irish author didn't invent the concept of vampires, this Gothic novel helped define and popularize its modern form, which has led to dozens and dozens of adaptations, including tonight's 5 movies, which were all instrumental installments in this character's development over the past century. In chronological order, we'll begin with the picture that started it all, and the oldest movie we've ever reviewed here on the show, Nosferatu. Silent but deadly. The 94-minute German expressionist horror film from director F.W. Murnau was released in March of 1922, becoming a huge success in America when it was released stateside over 7 years later. Although Nosferatu was not the first adaptation of Bram Stoker's famous 1897 Dracula novel, it is the oldest version to have survived to present day, which is a bit serendipitous as all copies of the film were supposed to have been destroyed after a court decided this unauthorized adaptation infringed on Stoker's copyright. Piranha Films may have been sued out of existence for creating this early example of Gothic cinema, but it was totally worth it. Nearly a century old, this silent film was obviously a difficult one to judge objectively. But the story is still a fascinating one. In 19th century Germany, an unwitting real estate apprentice, played by Gustav von Wagenheim, becomes entangled with the titular vampire, who has been killing nearby townsfolk at nightfall. Shot with long, wide shots and using bright color tinting to represent day and night, the old celluloid still looks remarkably well. Plus, there are some genuinely haunting and compelling moments here, especially Wagenheim's evening scare from the titular vampire. Despite having only 9 minutes of screen time, the pale-faced, big-eared Count Orlok, played by Max Schreck, is a terrifying character. As his tall shadow creeps along the walls of his secluded castle, you can sense the dread from our silent protagonist as this blood-sucking demon nears. Hardly scary by today's standards, but still decidedly unsettling, Nosferatu is a superbly influential classic with memorable moments and images, and necessary viewing for all cinephiles. I thought it was a cool movie. Next up, Dracula. Memorable moments, but dreadfully slow. One of the earliest pictures in Universal Studios' famed horror lineup, this vampire-themed picture was released in February of 1931. Directed by Tod Browning, the $355,000 picture focuses on the reclusive Count Dracula, who travels to England to prey upon a young woman. Continuing the role he perfected in Hamilton Dean's stage version of this story, Bela Lugosi stars as the ancient vampire in perhaps the character's most iconic portrayal. His clean-cut hair, welcoming charm, and long dark cape provide an air of mystery and intrigue to the villainous character. When he's tricked into looking at a mirror by Dr. Van Helsing, played by Edward Van Sloan, his violent reaction plays a bit childish and silly, but turns to frightening quite quickly. The oft-repeated close-up of Lugosi's unblinking stare are a bit chilling as well. During his introductory scene at the large and empty castle, he famously comments on the howling wolves roaming outside. "Listen to them, children of the night, what music they make." A terrifically memorable quote that has remained a fixture in almost every adaptation of the story since. The same can't be said for the rest of the dialogue, however, which feels kind of hammy, spoken between awkward pauses with stilted performances. I'm willing to give older black and white movies like this the benefit of the doubt, but some of these line deliveries really are inexcusable.
I will find your earth box and drive that stake through your heart.
Come here. Your will is strong, Van Helsing. More Wolfbane.
More effective than Wolfbane, Count.
Indeed.
Even though sound had been married to picture 4 years prior, it's evident this film was produced during the early years of the talkies. Besides the opening credits score to Swan Lake, there's virtually no music throughout the short 74-minute film. The result is huge, unbroken sections of silence. Even true silent films at least had ambient background music, whereas Dracula suffers from distracting dead air. Allegedly, the reason for this is because it was believed the audience would not accept or even understand non-diegetic orchestration. So indeed, the only scene in the entire movie with music is when they visit a theater. Fortunately, what Dracula lacks in sound it makes up for with sight, as every scene is impeccably and beautifully lit, with the 4x3 frame shadowed by a vignette. The set design is especially impressive, with large examples of Gothic architecture on full display. Strictly speaking, this is a horror film, but I have a hard time believing even those in the 1930s would have been scared by anything they saw here. Disappointingly, the movie never actually shows the deed, with each act of neck-biting proceeding at a comically slow pace before fading out to the next scene. After a compelling first act, the remainder of the picture fails to deliver any more intrigue. Mandatory viewing for horror fans, this pioneering effort may not be very entertaining or frightening, but it's still quite memorable. Dracula isn't as enjoyable as his lofty reputation would suggest, but it's an alright film. No official sponsor for tonight's episode, so I thought I'd do some self-promotion instead for Jogwheel's official merchandise store, thatreference.com. If you want to be comfortable, show off your favorite film quote, and help support Movie Night, check out the 25 custom t-shirts personally designed by yours truly. They're available in sizes from small to XXL, can ship internationally, and start at just $19 each. So click the link below to pick up some cool movie-inspired clothing. Thank you for indulging me. Now let's talk about Horror of Dracula. Straightforward and competent. Produced on a small budget of only £81,000, this Terence Fisher horror film was released in May of 1958. Unsurprisingly, this updated remake was an international hit and helped Hammer Films secure the rights to Universal's entire library of horror classics. The first entry in a 9-picture series, this short 82-minute feature wastes no time getting right to the blood-sucking action, which is on display in vibrant Technicolor. After vampire hunter John Van Eason goes missing after accepting a job at the Count's lavish castle, Peter Cushing as Dr. Van Helsing begins an investigation to find him. Although top bill, the sharply dressed Cushing doesn't appear until a third of the way into the picture, but his commanding presence and authoritative intellect make him a worthy hero. There have been dozens of interpretations of the Van Helsing character over the years, but Cushing's steadfast turn is definitely my favorite. Opposite him as the titular vampire is English legend Sir Christopher Lee. His menacing performance is outstanding and occasionally scary, but he's regretfully absent for most of the middle hour. Beneath his welcoming facade is a layer of contempt and lust, as he almost mockingly wishes his guest goodnight with a dismissive, "Sleep well, Mr. Harker." One of only 13 lines for him in the entire film. The two future Star Wars villains make an excellent pairing, especially during their intense final showdown, capped off with some marvelous special effects work. Elsewhere is Michael Gough, whom you likely know as Alfred in the Michael Keaton Batman films, as the husband of Dracula's victim. His partnership with Cushing borders on a full-on bromance, but their analytic approach to the mysterious forces at work is reasonably interesting.
I know your one wish is that Lucy should rest in peace. I promise to fulfill that wish. But first, if I have your consent, she can lead us to Dracula.
How can you suggest such a thing? That she should be possessed by this evil for another second? And what about Gerda's child out there? and the others she will defile. Oh, no, I couldn't.
Of course.
There's nothing particularly showy or even memorable in this picture, but it's an even-keeled approach that doesn't make any mistakes either. Horror of Dracula is a serviceable and fascinating vampire procedural, and a good film. Now my review of another remake, Nosferatu, the Vampire. Boring and unnecessary. From acclaimed director Werner Herzog, this West German vampire horror film saw limited release in France in 1979, before expanding internationally later that year. A stylistic remake of the silent film from 1922, this PG-rated feature closely follows the same story. After imprisoning a real estate clerk in his Transylvania castle, a vampire embarks towards Germany to feast on his next victim. After opening with a decidedly creepy credits montage of real-life mummies and skeletons, the 107-minute film settles in and practically falls asleep. I know I almost did. Unlike every other adaptation, which introduces Dracula within the first few scenes, this movie starts off extremely slow, with nearly 30 minutes passing before we see the pale-skinned vampire. This opening act may help draw in the viewer and set the mood, but at a certain point it's like, just get on with it already. This time around, the Count is portrayed by Klaus Kinski in a lonely and somewhat sympathetic turn, as he laments, "Not being able to grow old is a terrible thing." This is a more timid and soft-spoken vampire than we've seen before. Wearing his best Willy Wonka cosplay, Bruno Ganz stars opposite as the familiar estate agent, who just isn't given much to do besides reacting to his increasingly bizarre surroundings. Speaking of the environments though, they're actually quite beautiful and haunting. The picturesque European countryside is on full display in the steady 16:9 frame, while dark shadows hang throughout the Gothic interiors. Normally you'd think adding sound, more locations, color, and additional backstory would make any remake quantifiably better, but you'd be wrong. Compared to the inventive original, this is a drawn-out, self-indulgent imitation, and you can tell the film is poorly paced as this exact same plot worked perfectly fine with a narrative half as long.
The knife is old and could be dirty. It could give you blood poisoning. Please, let me do it. It's the oldest remedy in the world.
Oh, forget it. It's hardly worth mentioning. Just a little cut.
It's clear Herzog has reverence for the material. He even claimed in a radio interview that Nosferatu is the greatest German film of all time, but this adaptation unfortunately offers nothing new. Indeed, the film's most effective moments come when it's directly recreating scenes from the 1922 version. Seriously, that scene of Dracula creeping up on Gans's bed is the stuff of nightmare fuel. But cutaway shots of slow-motion bats with the moody sounds of a church hymnal playing in the background, it's too avant-garde for me. This poorly conceived, overly indulgent, largely unnecessary remake just isn't something I enjoyed watching. But that's just my opinion. If you think there's something about this you can appreciate, then by all means check it out, especially if you can tolerate its glacial pace. Many of the allowances and slack I gave the original sadly don't apply here, so I have to score Nosferatu the Vampire a 3 out of 10. Our last film of the evening is Bram Stoker's Dracula. Detrimentally ambitious. Directed by legendary auteur Francis Ford Coppola, this romantic horror film collected a $250 million cum above its $40 million budget. Released in November of 1992, the R-rated story follows the title character during a trip to England where he attempts to seduce a visitor's fiancée because she resembles his long-lost love. The high-profile adaptation is loaded with a star-studded cast. Gary Oldman is truly believable as the tortured villain, even beneath layers of makeup and hair. Winona Ryder is beautiful and conflicted as his young girlfriend. Anthony Hopkins is commanding as the resourceful vampire hunter, while Keanu Reeves and his shoddy English accent is badly miscast as the dumbfounded gent caught between all three. Special attention needs to be made to Oldman and Reeves. The former brings heartfelt anguish and gravitas to his complicated role, while the latter is grossly out of his depth in every scene they share. Coppola reportedly cast a young Reeves because he needed a hot star that female audiences would fawn over. Oops.
I didn't hear you come in.
Take care how you cut yourself.
It is more dangerous than you think.
A foul bowl, men's
vanity. Perhaps you should grow a beard.
The 128-minute narrative opens with overtly artistic imagery of an ancient battle with soldiers and corpses silhouetted against a large orange sunset. The film remains visually unique from then on, from the vibrant costumes to the lavish set design. The style is dark and gothic, but also saturated and alive, with special attention made to the film's many transitions and dissolves. These effects are especially impressive since they were all achieved with in-camera techniques like forced perspective miniatures or double exposure. In fact, there's just a single post-production effect in the entire movie. The film also faithfully incorporates the multiple diary narratives from the novel as well. Indeed, as its name would suggest, this adaptation breaks with decades of cinematic tradition by strictly adhering to Stoker's original story, and unfortunately, it's not always for the best. The multitude of rules and world building inherent to that expansive story tend to bog down the already overloaded film. There's just too many moving parts. Some of the long dormant elements reintroduced here include Dracula's ability to turn into green mist or survive in daylight unharmed. By focusing more of the story on Dracula's romantic desires, Coppola gives the narrative some emotional weight, but the scenes required between Oldman and Ryder just don't work. After declaring that, "I have crossed oceans of time to find you," I can believe the centuries-old vampire would lust for a cute goth chick that looks like his dead wife, but the chemistry they share just doesn't sell this passion. And ultimately, a romance without a convincing relationship cuts out the bottom of the entire film. There's a lot of interesting and engaging moments in this picture, but it's not nearly as cohesive or rewarding as it should be. The most sexualized and gory adaptation yet, this is still required viewing for all fans of vampire films. Bram Stoker's Dracula is provocative and inventive, but decidedly inconsistent. I thought it was a cool film. That does it for tonight's episode, but my vampire reviews continue next week in part 2 of this season opening special, so I hope you'll join me for that. Until then, you can click this information icon if you'd like to watch some related videos. Once again, my name is Jonathan Paul. Thanks for watching, and have a good movie night.